Okay.
All right.
Going to work.
All right.
So again,
Let's
thank
do
you
it. See
for
what we
doing
can do in
this.
30. See what we can do in 30 minutes. I'll try to keep my answers short.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for doing this. We know you're a busy man, so
No. It's good. Whenever a school calls, I'm like, yeah, I'm all over it.
okay. So should we go with the first question?
Yeah. All right. So the first question is about you mostly, and it's how did you get into the flat Earth theory?
I got into flat Earth back in 2014. I never got married or had kids. And so I know you guys aren't old enough to understand this, but if that ever happens, you have tons of free time on your hands, just tons. And because of that, and the internet was new, the internet actually was a new thing back in the day. I looked at just about every conspiracy you could think of. And by about 2014, I had run out. You know, I have an opinion. I don't like every conspiracy, but there's some I like and some I don't. We won't list them off. And in 2014, I'm like, okay, this part was just like the documentary, which was, all right, flat Earth. I'll shoot it down in a weekend. Why not? Because I hate it. And 9 months later, I was just banging my head on the keyboard going, there's no way, there's no way, there's no way. And that was basically how, and then I just gave up in 2015 and said, okay, I'm just going to make a series of videos and put them out on the internet with my contact information and say, hey, cry for help. Somebody shoot this thing down for me. And here we are 7 years later, and 3 books and a documentary and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it's been a wild ride. So there you go. Sorry, short answer, conspiracy boredom. That's how I got into it.
Oh,
What did you personally think of the documentary?
Oh, I hated it. But I understood what it was. I did not make the documentary, just so you know. It was done by an LA film team. In fact, Netflix didn't make the documentary. It was done by a team down in Los Angeles that was just doing a side project. And they contacted me and said, yeah, this seems like it's trending. Let's see where it goes. And we spent 7 months shooting. And at the end, they did not like us at all, especially when it came to kids. No offense, because I know the teacher's probably listening. Which is there was a I think a 12-year-old kid who asked me a question when I was at the podium at the conference, and apparently that was a real button for those guys. They just lost it. It triggered them, and they didn't know what to do, so they spun it in against us. But it was fine. It generated a huge amount of interest, which doesn't matter whether you love a topic or you hate a topic, as long as you're engaged in the topic. And any producer will tell you this, and I've heard this over the last 7 years. And so, yeah, everybody in our community hated it, but I sat in studio audiences at film festivals in around the country, in different countries, and it interested so many people because it felt safe. Even the title, Behind the Curve, because they're dumb. Right. That was the way. It's like, oh, they're going to make fun of flat earthers. Let's go in and watch this thing. And it worked. So there you
go. So all the attention, like you're just glad that it came.
Oh, yeah. There's an old saying. The original saying is, even bad press is free.
Yeah.
Meaning, well, hell, look at I'm not going to swear here, but look at Andrew Tate recently. Right. Andrew Tate has generated huge amounts of social media. He is playing social media like grand piano, right? He knows exactly what he's doing. That is not his character. I've seen earlier interviews. He's a quiet, unassuming guy, but he's found his niche. And it doesn't matter. Again, he can be deplatformed all he wants, but if every YouTube channel is doing a video on him, then, by the way, he's one of ours. If every YouTube channel is doing a video on him, then it works. So yeah, even bad press is free press.
Yeah.
What would be your most confident clue of the Earth being flat?
It wouldn't even be one of my clues. It wouldn't. The clues I did were very broad strokes, and I mean, yes, I'm glad that I inspired a whole bunch of people to come up with different clues. But the one that I love more than anything, okay, I'll tell you two. The one that gets most people into it is long distance photography, by far and away. Long distance photography, which they don't talk about really in the documentary, which is HD technology has really changed that. 30 years ago, before HD, there was a thing before HD, guys, that you could shoot ships long distance and it wouldn't make any difference because everything would be really, really fuzzy. Now you can zoom in on boats that are way, way, way too far. You should not be able to see them. And that's what I never encouraged a single person to do that. That's what gets most people. My favorite is gravity versus the vacuum of space. So what I mean by that is, and I'll screw up some terms for you guys, but you'll get it, which is, let's say there's a second floor of where you are right now. Let's say you turn it into a vacuum chamber and you have a valve in front of you. You pull that valve. What happens? It's not like the movies at all. It is not a slow process. It is instant. It is violent. Any scuba diver will tell you this, any submarine guy, anybody that has to deal with deep sea pressure. The air will rush upstairs, right? It'll equalize. It's the second law of thermodynamics. Pressure cannot exist. I know it's physics and astronomy, but you'll get it. Pressure cannot exist in non-pressure without a barrier. It absolutely cannot without an actual barrier. So the question is, when you go outside, why is our atmosphere still here? And the only response you have, literally the only response is gravity. That is the knee-jerk response. And I go, oh, you mean the same gravity that couldn't keep the air in your room from running upstairs just 10 seconds ago? That gravity? And then you're kind of stuck, because it's like, because you want to say, well, there's more gravity, or the atmosphere is much thicker. It's like, okay, tell me. And no scientist has ever been able to tell me what exactly happens at the bleeding edge of space. What happens when our atmosphere ends and space begins? For me, it is by far my favorite, but a lot of people still don't get it. It's tough to visualize because what we're breathing in right now is not a vacuum. But if you put a vacuum chamber in a window, right next to you in a room, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, because we can't see, we can't see it. What we're breathing in is 99.99% transparent. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing during the documentary that I found interesting was the long distance photography and like the sun setting and the different horizons you were talking about, how the sun just like disappears now.
Oh yeah. I don't know if I talked about it in the Netflix thing, but or maybe I did. That was a while ago. But yeah, the atmosphere thickness, let's beat on that for a minute, which is, we are not breathing in nothing. In fact, you're not even really breathing in a whole lot of oxygen. It's 80% nitrogen and 20% oxygen. We'll throw out the trace gases for now, because who cares? Because people will often ask me, and this goes into the sun thing. It's like, okay, why can't you see Hawaii from California? Why can't you see Europe from New York? And why can't you see Mount Everest from everywhere? Because, well, it's the highest place in the world, right?
Yeah.
And it's because of the thickness of the atmosphere. It compounds over time. So what we're talking in right now, pretty much transparent. But if you go out 50 miles, it becomes less transparent, 90%, then 80%, then 70%. It's no different really than a thin version of water. Have you ever seen those documentaries where you see whales underneath the water, right? But you can only see the whales about 200 yards, 300 yards, and they just fade into obscurity. Any scuba diver will tell you that when you get below 200 feet, there is no more color. You can't see the sunlight. It could be a summer day and the sun could be absolutely right overhead, but the sun cannot penetrate 200 feet of water in any ocean. So it doesn't even have to be, it could be a really pretty ocean. You're still not gonna be able to see it. So the sun literally just goes off into the distance. We have some fantastic videos. I got a playlist. We spent years on this one, where it goes off into the distance and just fades away.
Yeah.
If you look at it closely enough, it's like, what? First time I saw one of those videos, it's like, what's happening? But to the naked eye, you're never going to notice. You can't tell without an HD camera. You'll never be able to get it. Same thing with the sunsets, on a beach. It's like, oh, there's the sun setting. Yeah, until you zoom in on it with a filter with an HD camera, then it pops back up. And then you keep zooming in, and finally it just goes, just disappears. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Our next question is, what have you or the community conducted? What experiments have you conducted regarding flat Earth?
Oh boy. The big ones, the most common ones, again, would be all the people that ran down to the beach with HD cameras. By far and away, 90% of the footage that the tests that were done were done with those. Because you're probably saying, well, why would you do this? And plus, we've done laser experiments along those same distances at night, and then we've done mirror experiments using the sun during the daytime. We sent up weather balloons, for better or for worse. But the reason why so many of them are done on the ground, one, because nobody owns flying cars, but the other thing is that the curvature of the Earth, the scientific formula, is roughly 8 inches per mile, which is 8 inches per mile squared, which most people don't even remember once they leave high school, which means it's not like stairs, right? That's just 8 inches per mile. 8 inches per mile squared, meaning it gets more and more and more severe, because eventually, if it's a globe, it's going to have to go vertical. So at 10 miles, that is 10 times 10, which is 100 times 8, which is 800 inches. 800 inches of curvature at 10 miles. That's not a lot. But if you go out to 50 miles, it's pushing 1,670 feet, give or take. That's a lot. So which means eventually there are objects no different than any sphere you're looking at. There should be objects on the other side of the hill. You know, you can't see on the other side of a mountain. The Earth, same way. You shouldn't be able to see things eventually on the other side of the hill. And you can say refraction all you want, but we've got some absolutely stunning photography, where you have the horizon behind the objects and there's nothing being cut off in the front. So where's the horizon exactly? And I've even had some people in science come back, well, the horizon's invisible. And what you're seeing is a complete illusion. It's like, nah, not in all conditions. Oh, by the way, those experiments vary widely because, again, what we're breathing in is not nothing. And temperature affects it, humidity affects it, atmospheric pressure affects it, all sorts of fun things. You know, the weather just plays havoc with our experiments. We try to go on clear days. There you go.
So regarding like the dome and firmament,
yeah,
would it be like, could you like predict like how high it would be or like what it'd be made out of?
And was like everybody believe in it?
No, excellent questions. You guys have been doing your homework. Okay, so in our community, maybe 70%, 75% of people believe in a dome. So for anyone watching this, you're not living in a tiny little rock covered in a little bit of water and a little bit of gas, right? Flying through space. You're living in a building with walls and a floor and a ceiling. Probably shaped like a dome on the inside, but the outside is probably squared off. It's probably a big box on the outside because, well, engineering loves right angles and they hate curves. In fact, computers, you can't draw a sphere in a computer. Not really, because that's why pixels are pixels. Pixels are always square. So when it comes to what you're looking at, you're probably looking at a very shallow domed sports stadium. So it doesn't have to be very, people say snow globe because, well, it's easy to understand. It's like everyone's seen a snow globe, which a really, really high arc, but you don't need a really, really high arc. If it's 25,000 miles wide, let's just say, not counting Antarctica and whatever's out there, then the height of the dome might even be 3,000 miles high. And that's not a lot, but at the same time, that's more enough for our civilization. Remember, most of the people 99% of the people live between sea level and 1 mile up. Commercial airlines cap out at 10 miles. Spy planes, if you believe them, cap out at 20 miles. That's not very high. So even if you had a dome that was only a couple 100 miles high, you could get away with it. You could put an entire civilization in there. But for 3,000 miles, we're just we're just throwing that number out there. Why not?
Yeah.
So would you say the stars are like actual physical things, or are they just like generated
lights in the sky? No different than a planetarium. No different than a planetarium, with the exception of better technology. I mean, we have 8K stuff right now. Well, what would we have if we could go another 1,000 years? What sort of technology could we produce there? So if you're in a planetarium, I throw this, I know I'm a little dated when I say that because you guys probably don't even know what a planetarium is. Back in the day, kids, when you were really bored, you could go to a building and sit on your backs and watch stars, inside, basically the inside of a very small sports stadium type thing. So the question is, okay, do you see Jupiter up there in the planetarium? Yes, you do. Can you land on it? No, you can't. Why not? Because it's just a light on a ceiling. Okay. When you walk out of that building, who's to say you're just not in a much, much bigger building? And I know that sounds a little bit like science fiction, but to us, yeah, sure, it would be. Outside of our world, outside of our civilization, why wouldn't it be possible? There's been novels that have talked about this for a long, long time. So, and by the way, the short version, again, it depends on who's listening. We had nothing to do with the building of this place at all. Yeah. We just kept the secret. In fact, our civilization didn't even figure it out until we had the technology to do so, which was about 1960. And so if you find out in 1960, do you tell everybody? Nah, no way. Too disruptive. But go ahead.
Yeah, at our school, we actually have a physical dome, a part of our building.
Yeah.
So it was just...
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And by the way, if you want to look up something fun, go into Google and type in ancient cosmologies and click on images. Every culture, even the Greeks, even though the Greeks changed their mind later, every culture drew the exact same thing. for a long, long time. I don't care what culture it was. You'll see a wonderful collage of it, which is they drew a snow globe or some sort of dome structure because the stars curved overhead. Now, how they noticed this, I mean, granted, you were really bored 500 years ago and you sat up and stared at the stars for hours and hours on end, but they figured it out. So,
Would you say the sun's real, or is it just another CGI?
I'm torn on that one because it's generating a light, no question, and it's generating some heat. Yeah, no question. But could it be something like if you take a magnifying glass to a sun, right, and you generate a point on the ground, that point is extremely bright. In fact, that point even generates its own heat. So could the sun be just a point of light that's being generated from another source? Very, very possible. The bigger question is, what's the moon? Which is, if the sun and the moon are roughly the same size, say 50 miles wide, and let's say 300,000 or 3,000 miles high, then the sun cannot be reflecting the sun's light. I'm sorry, the moon cannot be reflecting the sun's light, which means the moon is generating its own light. You can go out and test with a point and click. I think I've got one of these damn things around here. A point and click infrared thermometer, one of these $20 jobs, and test the moon shadow versus the moonlight. It is warmer in the moon shadow than it is the moonlight for up to, depending on how big the moon is, 13 degrees Fahrenheit. That's impossible. Meaning it's colder in the sunshade, but why is it warmer in the moonshade? And this blows scientists, and they don't even know what to do with it because most of them have never heard of it before. But we can test it with copper strips. We can test it with predator vision. You know, there's cameras with predator vision now, and it's all absolutely real. Even I dismissed it, and I was into flat Earth like a year before I heard that one. So,
next question. A lot of people in the community say like dinosaurs never happened.
I hate that one. Okay. I believe the dinosaurs happened. Yes, there are. Okay, let's preface this. When you get into flat Earth, the biggest problem is when you get into flat Earth, it is such a big concept, which means if the whole world is a big hoax, then everything in it must be a hoax. And there's a new term out there called auto-hoaxing, which is whatever you see on the news has got to be fake immediately. So it's guilty until proven innocent. You know, the opposite of our legal system. It's like, okay, so when people, and so if everything's fake, therefore dinosaurs must be fake. Do I believe that the giant reptiles roam the earth? Yeah, I do. And anyone listening would probably upset them. But at the same time, do I believe in the carbon dating system? No, I don't. No, I don't. Not even for a little bit. There's a wonderful fish out there you can look up called the coelacanth. COELACANTH. Fantastic example. It's a big, ugly fish with a whole bunch of extra fins, right?
Yeah.
Every scientist decades ago would have said this thing is absolutely extinct. It's been extinct for 70 million years, right? And they would have bet the farm. I mean, everyone would have bet every cent they had on this. It's like, oh, dead for 70 million years. And then the British Navy catches one off of South Africa, and then another one off of Madagascar, another one off of Mozambique. And pretty soon they figure out, it's like, oh, wow, they're all over Africa. So how did they screw this up so badly? And how did because, the carbon dating system was involved here. That's a prehistoric fish. So when someone comes back and say, Mark, do you believe in the Loch Ness Monster? Do you guys know what the Loch Ness Monster is?
Yes.
Okay. Reptilian dinosaurs potentially living in the murky lakes of England and other places. Do I believe in them? Why the hell not? And people say, well, because they've been extinct for at least 100 million years, right? And then I go, you mean like that fish? That one right over there? That fish, which National Geographic is swimming around with right as we speak? That one? And so I say that fish is absolutely just a anomaly, right? But everything else, no, that's absolutely true. There's nothing else except that fish. That's the tough part about science. Science sticks to their guns, and it's absolutely real until it's not. Let me throw one more at you really quick, which is we still got time. Which is the giant panda, a great example. Scientists just laughed, absolutely laughed. It's like, okay, so there's a big black and white teddy bear looking thing in the woods. He only eats bamboo and he just lays on his back all day and acts cute. That's a real thing. And they laughed and they laughed and laughed until they caught one. It's like, oh, okay, well, it's real now. I hate that about science. It drives me insane. They never apologize for anything.
So do you believe in the asteroids killing all the dinosaurs? And like, if it was inside the dome or it came through the dome?
Do I believe in terraforming between civilizations? Yeah. Yeah, I do. Whoever built this place tends to, I think they've evolved with time. They've done things less and less extreme. Throwing a giant rock at the world to wipe out a species, probably not the most efficient thing in the world. And by the way, that goes into where we are. You know, our unbroken civilization only goes back 5,000 years, but we're not the first people to be here, the first people to rent this apartment. I mean, look at the Bosnian pyramids, the real pyramids, Puma Punku, Machu Picchu, the sunken cities off of Japan, the sunken cities off of India. There's all sorts of remnants of previous civilizations. But do they have to be terraformed? Yeah, I believe this place is really like a school, which is once a civilization reaches a certain point, they have to leave, right? They've got to move on to wherever they go after this. It's kind of like seniors, right? Once you graduate, it's like, you don't have to go home, but you got to get the hell out of here because we got a whole nother class coming in. There you go.
So in your documentary, you brought up the Arctic Treaty. Can you just expand?
Antarctic Treaty.
Antarctic Treaty.
Oh yeah, the Antarctic Treaty, brilliant. That was, I just stumbled across that thing, which is, it's the only unbroken treaty in the history of treaties. It was established roughly 1959, and about the same time that we announced the Van Allen belts, and it basically locks down Antarctica from the private sector forever. It says, and you can look at them online, the PDF's out there, and if you can't find it, I'll send it to you, but it's easy to find. Which basically says that no private corporation is allowed to set up shop from any country ever. It's like, what are you talking about? No one even owns Antarctica. It's like, what? It was a huge red flag for me. In the United States, as you know, if you wanted to start, the oil and gas companies, they want to start fracking in your neighbor's backyard, they could make that happen in a week. They could have jump in there really, really quick. It's like, and yet this place, Antarctica, which is this entire mountain range made out of coal and oil and gas and uranium and all sorts of other minerals. And not only are we not even allowed to go down there, only the military scientists are allowed to go down there, but we're not even allowed to talk about it. That's the part that blows me away. I mean, you got massive companies like Shell and ExxonMobil with huge amounts of liquid resources, and they can't even run full page ads saying it'd be really, really great to go down there, create jobs and economic stability and all this. It's like, nope. In fact, even the treaty's not up for review until 2041. How does that happen? Really, a treaty pushing 1960 has we're not even going to review the policy until 80 years later? Mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. The world runs off money and power and greed, and this bypasses all of it. It says, oh yeah, what conspiracy could be out there bigger? And by the way, if you want to know why you do something like that, it's because you have an oil and gas company with all sorts of decent tech, right? And all of a sudden one of their planes goes off course, and it goes into some zone which you really don't want them to go into, maybe some out where near the outer marker. And then that discussion is like, what do we do with those guys? Well, it's a loose end you got to tie up. Wink, wink. And how many of those loose ends do you have to tie up before suddenly finally says, you know what? Let's not even lay anybody down here. It's gonna be too much of a hassle. So that's what they did. It's brilliant.
So how deep do you think like the Earth's crust is before how would you say, go through the dome or the firmament?
Oh yeah, 8 feet. You can get a shovel and test this right now. No, I'm kidding. It is, well, that's just it. We don't know because mainstream science doesn't know. The deepest hole ever drilled, and thank God you guys are American because otherwise I have to convert to kilometers, is less than 8 miles. That's the deepest hole anyone's drilled. The Russians and the Germans tried it for years and years, tried to punch past 8 miles, and they could never, ever do it. And you're saying, well, because it could be because of magma or blah, blah, blah. I go, no, that's not the point. The point is, if you can only drill down 8 miles, and according to the globe, it's 4,000 miles to the center of the Earth, what are you showing us exactly in those cross sections, right? It's those wonderful cross sections where you have red and orange and yellow and white, perfect 1,000 mile thick bands, and there's nothing happening in there. And you realize after a while, it's like they have no idea. In fact, if you look up the wiki entry, you can see in the fine print, it's like, oh yeah, we have no idea what's down there, which is extrapolating from volcanoes. So it's like, okay, why are you showing me this? It's like, well, we got to take our best guess. And why don't you put a big question mark in the center of the globe? So that's not what we do. We're science. we just put our diagram. It's like, yeah, but what about Jupiter and Saturn? You put a cross section on them too, at Mars. It's like, anyway, sorry, I get worked up.
Oh, yeah.
So do you believe like there's objects outside of the dome, like say the other planets? Or
No, but okay, no planets, but there are objects. So in a planetarium, nothing you see on the sky is real. The stars aren't real, the comets aren't real, the planets aren't real. I mean, the planets are floating around and do anything. You know, they look three-dimensional, of course. We can do that with HD technology all day. Even holograms, we can mess with that a little bit. You know, can you land on them? No. What's outside? So space is absolutely it's an illusion. It's a very, very good illusion, and 99.9% of the people buy it, which is why you create an illusion. Outside of this place, for me, it's either a whole bunch of more of these buildings, snow globes, and different levels of technology, you know, some of the Stone Age, some of the pre-industrial, and so on, or an unlimited universe. Don't forget, you know, people say, well, you know, what's outside of it? Well, if this is a one-off, and I do not believe this is a one-off, but if it is a one-off, then, and if this world is 99.9% conflict, meaning it doesn't matter how beautiful, how powerful, how rich, how talented you are, there is always something to complain about. Hardly anyone's ever completely happy ever. Then what's outside of this place has to be 99.9% unlimited. And I think it's cyclical. I think we're here. I think we're here basically as a school. This is a learning experience. The world can only be one of three things. It can only be entertainment. I don't think that's the case because not a lot of people are having fun. It's a prison planet. It's awfully nice for a jail. I don't buy that. Or it's a school, and which is kind of a mix of a whole bunch of things. And that's what it feels like to me. This has always felt like a place where we're supposed to gain perspective.
do you believe in like, so the people who control us could be like the aliens possibly? Or is it like,
Okay, that's a whole
upper
nother thing. We'll see how much time we got. How much time we got?
we can go past.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Fine.
here's the thing with aliens. Do I believe there's things flying up there that aren't us? Yeah. Are they the US Air Force? Not most of them, no. You can take night vision binoculars, by the way, not just night vision, something in a 5 power or higher, and you can turn them on at night. The guy suggested this to me years ago, way before I got into flat earth. The sky is crawling with things, absolutely crawling with stuff. And you say, well, the first day it's like, wow, there's a bunch of satellites. And then you see them moving in ways that satellites don't move, a lot of them. And you realize that there's something in here with us, previous civilizations, again, that I listed earlier. So do I think that that's one of the big questions? Are there other civilizations, older versions? Do I think they're aliens from Mars and Venus and Jupiter? No. Do I think they're older versions of us? Yeah, I do. And the big question is, are they in here with us? Are they trapped, or can they come and go as they please? I kind of like to think they're in here with us, and there's protocols in place, meaning there are rules. Meaning, one of the oldest UFO arguments is, why don't they land in the middle of downtown Chicago and come out and take some selfies and sign some autographs and stuff? And because that would change everything, right?
Yeah.
There's some it's Prime Directive from Star Trek. So if that was the case, then, you know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Sorry, what was the initial question?
like who's like controlling us?
Oh, yeah. So who built it? You know, it really goes into one of two things, right? Which is an even a higher place than them. So you're either talking about an ancient civilization that's older and more powerful than our own, and even bigger than the aliens that are in here with us, or the divine. But really, you're just kind of splitting hairs, because one man's advanced tech is another man's deity. You know what I'm saying? If a shift landed in Chicago tomorrow, two things would happen. One would be a group of people that would come in and say, oh, wow, they do look like the blue people from Avatar. Isn't that cool? You know, all the nerds would do that. And then you'd have another group and say, we must start a church and worship the blue people right now. And they would, and you'd have religions that would be built up around this. And so, by the way, that was the thing I forgot, completely spaced it out. You want to look up the greatest UFO sighting of all time? Look up the 1561 Nuremberg event. Absolutely brilliant. It wasn't Roswell. It wasn't 1899 Texas. It wasn't, pre-World War II. 1561 Germany. There's even a wiki entry on it, which is April, beautiful spring day in April in Nuremberg, Germany. 2 giant armadas, space aircraft carriers, come in and just start beating the hell out of each other. And then finally a third faction shows up and breaks it up. It took a full hour for this to happen. Of course, there was no photography back then, but they sketched the whole thing out. Not a
Oh.
cloud in the sky. It was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Oh, that's crazy.
So do you have any questions for us?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple. How'd you get into it? How'd you find what made you decide to call me this morning?
So this past week, we've watched your documentary, Behind the Curve.
In class?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. I'm
It's
surprised, by the way, how many classes get to watch that now. So that's cool.
It was,
Okay.
it was about a 3 to 4 day process, and then we were given different topics to present on.
Yeah.
And ours were, what clues does Mark Sargent give us in his YouTube videos?
And we saw your YouTube channel with your contact info. We like thought like, how cool would it be to like actually get Mark Sargent himself to talk for us?
That is, and thank you, is flattering. Yeah, that's why I put it out there. Well, I initially put it out there, my contact info, which is I never recommend for anybody to do, especially girls, to this day. Do not do it. Which is I put it out there so that academics could get a hold of me, because again, I could not prove the globe in a court of law. That was my big thing. And so I put all my contact info out there immediately and said, okay, somebody with a PhD or a master's in something, get a hold of me and tell me not just the obvious stuff, tell me other things I may have missed. And I was getting contacted by all sorts of other people they didn't talk about in the documentary, all sorts of pilots and air traffic controllers and engineers and just about everybody from the military, which was fascinating to me. One of the big things they all said, it's like, it doesn't matter what weapon you fire, we never take the curvature into the firing solution or the spin of the earth, which we didn't talk about, which is, the Coriolis effect. That never gets factored in either. And he goes, oh yeah, we hear about it, but it never ever comes into play. It doesn't matter how far you're firing. So whenever I see a CNN story, it's like, oh yeah, this sniper had to take into account the curvature of the earth, I just laugh, because I've got a whole bunch of military friends that say, yeah, never ever in a million years. So anyway, the
Hey, Mark,
teacher's here, which means we are done.
Yeah.
Mark, thanks a lot, man. If they have any follow-up questions, could they send you them again? Would you mind? Or
Oh yeah. Whatever you guys need. If there's any specific resources, if I can't find it, I can direct you. Or if there's any other person that you ever wanted to talk to that you see on the internet, if I don't know them directly, I'm wired in, so I can get you in touch with them.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
thanks for your message earlier about, hey, it's okay to disagree and agree, but as long as you have that conversation, that's
Oh
what
yeah.
that's what I want them to have,
I don't mind. Hey, at least you guys weren't yelling at me. So
Yeah.
No. So
thanks,
hey,
guys.
thanks again, man. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, you too. Bye bye.